The winter of 2009 may feel like it was just yesterday, but the Trump administration's Operation Warp Speed is betting more than $2 billion that Americans have already forgotten about GlaxoSmithKline's elaborate scam that caused narcolepsy and cataplexy epidemics across Europe 11 years ago. As the trustworthy stewards of global public health, in the years leading up to 2009, the World Health Organization worked to ensure that dozens of European and African nations executed agreements to protect their citizens in the event of an unforeseen global pandemic. These sleeping contracts stipulated that pharmaceutical companies would be called upon to produce flu vaccines and be paid billions of dollars for doing so. But there was no reason to fear any financial impropriety because the contracts could only be activated in the event that the W.H.O. declared a Phase 6 influenza pandemic. Unfortunately, the government officials who signed the contracts never suspected that GSK makes multi-million-dollar donations to the WHO in return for control over decisions that result in GSK windfalls. For 6 years leading up to 2009, the WHO displayed their definition of influenza pandemic on the top of their pandemic preparedness homepage. It read, "An influenza pandemic occurs when a new influenza virus appears, against which the human population has no immunity, resulting in several simultaneous epidemics worldwide with enormous numbers of deaths and illness." On June 11, 2009, the WHO declared H1N1 swine flu to be a global influenza pandemic, Phase 6. Curiously, at that point in time, there were only 144 swine flu deaths in the entire world. Nevertheless, the WHO's declaration triggered $18 billion in sleeping contracts to activate across the world, and production of hundreds of millions of H1N1 vaccine doses kicked into high gear, including GlaxoSmithKline's Pandemrix. Suspiciously, just 39 days before declaring the pandemic, the WHO deleted the pandemic definition from their website. When confronted, they told the media that their definition painted a rather bleak picture and could be very scary. In the new definition, the WHO no longer required that anyone die before they declare a pandemic. GSK's Pandemrix jab was an experimental vaccine that was never tested for safety or efficacy. It was given straight to hundreds of millions of Africans and Europeans. This wasn't the time for red tape and formalities. By any definition, rather, by the new definition, we were in a global pandemic. The WHO did not declare the 2009 pandemic on its own. Before making the declaration, the WHO Director General, Dr. Margaret Chan, sought guidance from an emergency committee drawn from a panel of 160 scientists on the WHO's International Health Regulations Review Committee. The WHO describes these advisors as the world's leading experts in their respective fields, but their identities are still shrouded in secrecy, which the WHO claimed was necessary to protect them from outside influences. But a shocking 2010 British Medical Journal investigation revealed that numerous emergency committee members who voted for the pandemic declaration had financial ties to flu vaccine and Tamiflu manufacturers, including GlaxoSmithKline. Wolfgang Bodard is a former delegate to the European Council. In a documentary about the pandemic, he said, "The WHO officials have no idea about such things. They have to depend on scientists. And the scientists are allocated to them by the countries and by the organizations that finance the WHO. And many of them gave advice and made decisions that benefited the pharmaceutical industry." Narcolepsy is more than a minor inconvenience in an otherwise normal life. Narcoleptics suffer from the extreme tendency to fall asleep whenever in relaxed surroundings. Cataplexy is a condition in which strong emotion or laughter causes a person to suffer sudden physical collapse. GSK's adjuvanted Pandemrix vaccine caused both, devastating at least 1,300 children across Europe, for life. In the media, GSK's AS03 adjuvant, added to stimulate a powerful immune response, shouldered the blame for amplifying these heinous reactions. Documents obtained by plaintiffs in a series of European lawsuits revealed that GSK knew about the mounting adverse events associated with Pandemrix in the winter of 2009, including a 5.4-fold increase in death. By December 2009, an injured person filed a report with GSK for every 12,500 doses of Pandemrix administered. Yet, they continued promoting their vaccine in order to move inventory. As lawsuits began to pile up, the UK spent millions of pounds defending itself, ultimately settling for 9-figure sums after losing on appeal. After all, every country that signed a sleeping contract was required to give GSK full legal indemnity for their fast-track pandemic vaccine, leaving taxpayers on the hook for defending and settling hundreds of lawsuits. GSK never stood trial for destroying 1,300 young lives with narcolepsy and cataplexy, and they never paid $1 in fines for influencing the fake pandemic in what Wolfgang Wodardt called one of the greatest medical scandals of the century.
Governments do like epidemics and just seem to like war, really. It's a chance to impose their will on us and get us all scared so that we huddle together and do what we're told.
Relying on the same attenuated definition of pandemic, on March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 to be a global pandemic, when its partner, the COVID-19 Therapeutics Accelerator, received $125 million commitments from the Gates Foundation and MasterCard just one day prior. On July 31, 2020, GSK and Sanofi scored $2.1 billion U.S. taxpayer dollars to partner on an experimental COVID-19 vaccine. Sanofi will provide the vaccine and GSK will provide, you guessed it, hundreds of millions of doses of their ASO3 adjuvant from the 2009 narcolepsy epidemic. Will they get away with it this time?